Prayer is so powerful. It's life-changing. It's you-changing. It's world-changing. And God actually loves to hear you pray. But how do you do it? Today we're going to learn straight from Jesus how to pray. Today on the Chris Stefanick Show. Welcome to the Chris Stefanick Show. We're here every week to give you the tools and inspiration you need to live your everyday life with joy. I'm so glad you're watching. So is God. In fact, the fact that you're watching, I think it's because God has called you to deepen your prayer life and you listened to Him. Congratulations for taking that next step. If you want daily inspiration, click below this video, sign up for the Daily Anchor. Just free. We want to bless you every day. We put that in your inbox, no strings attached. Thank you to our missionaries of joy who make this and all our work possible. You are changing lives with every episode. And this episode is sponsored in part by EWTN. You can catch this and so much more on EWTN Plus streaming. Link in the show notes. My mind is blown that God actually loves us so much that He wants us to pray. I just love that. And a recent study found that most Americans still do pray. Despite the fact that religious unaffiliation is rising, this recent study showed that 85% of Americans engage in some form of spiritual practice, the most common practice being what they would just say is prayer. 61% pray regularly. 39% of those people said that they meditate regularly. 9 in 10 of praying Americans said that they had some prayer answered in the past year. 84% of Americans said that when they pray, they're convinced that someone's listening to them, that God's actually hearing them. 71% said that prayer is not accurately reflected in pop culture. That's always struck me too. I'm watching a movie, someone's about to be eaten by a shark. Literally anyone, even a non-believer, would be like, God help me in that moment. He's never mentioned. It's like he's missing. It's not a real depiction of life, honestly. Let's see, half of the people who pray, so they're convinced it makes them better people. So they're seeing an impact of prayer on their own souls. And speaking of a representation of God in the media, when asked who from Star Wars they would most want to pray with, most people said Yoda. Which I think is completely obvious.
100%.
I mean, I don't even trust a person who would say...
Who else would you... What other...
Boba Fett. I don't want to pray with Boba Fett.
Who's the older guy that, like... I'm not a Star Wars nerd, and I'm sorry.
That,
who's
the older guy? Obi-Wan Kenobi, dude.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a valid option.
Okay, this is a wrap. I'll see you. God bless you, man.
Sorry.
That would be a valid option. Or Luke. Luke would be kind of cool.
I don't want to pray with Luke.
But no, I agree.
Luke's
Yoda,
whiny,
come on.
Yeah.
He's a little whiny.
Sorry, I feel like I'm going to make people
He's become a bit whiny in the later episodes. But can you blame him?
Man.
Guy's been through a lot.
Back,
but Yoda. He's got to be Yoda. But okay, so
I'm going to go with Obi-Wan. Sorry, just to wrap a bow on this. Yeah. Just to be a little contrary. He seems like a wise spiritual father figure.
He is more relatable than Yoda.
Yeah, Yoda, I don't even know what Yoda is.
But no one watching knows who you are yet, so we're going to get there in a second. Okay. So most people pray, feel a need for prayer, but how do you do it? I can think of no better person to ask on this planet than Jesus, who's not physically with us today, but the second best with us today Jesus is with us spiritually, but not in like an interview style.
Fair. That's fair.
But Scott Powell is.
But I am. Good to see you, Chris.
You too, man.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Oh, it's an honor to have you here, brother. Yeah, Scott teaches at the seminary in Denver, forms our next generation of priests.
Hope so.
And we got the best of the best here in Denver, so thanks for what you're doing, man.
Thanks, man.
And he and his wife, Annie, also founded Camp Wojtyła. How do you spell that? Because people will Google it and never find it.
Oh, no, this is great. So it's, WOJYTLA.
Thank you.
But the website is just camp-w.com. We don't make anybody spell Wojtyła. That is our gift to the public.
Genius.
Yeah.
And also Scott's a dad of 3
I am.
and one of my dearest friends.
Yeah,
so it's fun having you here, man.
Likewise.
Oh, and he wrote a book. Walking with Christ. I just happened to have one here.
What a coincidence.
A journey through the Gospel of Luke. And a profound way to pray is just to listen to the Lord speak to us through Scripture. So Google that, Walking with Christ, Scott Powell, A Journey Through the Gospel of Luke. We can also link to it in the show notes. Okay, so how do you pray? How did Jesus teach us to pray? We have the obvious, like the Our Father. And I love the question that his disciples asked, Lord, teach us to pray. He probably loved that question more than almost anyone that he received. Hey there, I just want to share something really important with you guys real quick. You know what's crazy? This entire show, every episode, every conversation, every life changed, only happens because of our supporters. The Chris Stefanick Show is powered by people like you, people who believe in spreading the joy of the gospel. Now here's the deal. Each year we reach millions of people, but there are millions more that have not received not just the good, but the great news of the gospel. We want to reach those people, walk with them, and that's where you come in. When you become a monthly donor, a missionary of joy, you're not just donating, you're actually making this mission possible. You're helping us bring the hope, truth, and joy of the gospel to a world that desperately needs it. And that's not all. As a missionary of joy, you get exclusive access to all our video series, including Living Joy, Rise, Renewed, Fearless, and more. You get exclusive early access to new releases. You get Monday motivation texts direct from me. And you get access to our daily anchor, daily inspiration to fuel your faith. The truth is, the gospel is too good to keep to ourselves. If this show or our work has encouraged you, challenged you, or strengthened your faith, imagine how many more lives we can change together. Don't just watch the mission, fuel it. Click the link below and become a monthly donor today. It'll be the best investment you make this year. And his answer was the Our Father, but there's more than that. Like if you're going to be someone's disciple, you're going to be watching carefully how they do it.
Yeah, that's true.
And he teaches us a lot by example. So roll with that.
Yeah, he does. So here's what's been kind of, so we kind of brought, not to break the fourth wall kind of a thing, but
no, go ahead.
You know, we kind of brought this up the other day and we talked about like, hey, what's on our heart? And we talked about prayer. And when I keep going back to those two questions, how does Jesus pray and how does Jesus teach us to pray? This might sound like it doesn't apply, but I think it does very much. The one thing I keep coming back to in my own mind and heart, and I think this is what's on Jesus' mind and heart too, is the story of the Exodus. And I want to tell you what I mean by that. And I think the Exodus is actually a tool that we don't use enough to understanding what our own prayer should actually look like and what Jesus's looks like.
I can attest to that because I've never used the Exodus as a tool to teach me how to pray, so I'm excited.
Au contraire, I think you have every time you pray the Our Father. I think
Yes,
it's all
I
over the
have.
place. Yeah. So
Right.
there's two moments. There's a couple. Just
That's
you know, if you ask the question like, where does Jesus pray, or what does it look like when he prays? One of the most important moments of Jesus in prayer is actually the scene of the Transfiguration. Right. This really familiar scene. A lot of us are familiar with. It shows up in various of the Gospels. I love the way Luke tells the story, and I'm kind of riffing on something that Pope Benedict XVI said in his wonderful book, Jesus of Nazareth, which these beautiful commentary and reflections on the Gospels. But he says in the Gospel of Luke, it's the only one of the Gospels that talks about the Transfiguration that tells you why Jesus went up on the mountain. So you remember the story, right? Oh, yeah. Jesus and the apostles, they're getting ready. They're actually moving closer and closer to Jerusalem, where Jesus is going to do his great work of salvation. The passion is looming on the horizon. The religious leaders are getting frustrated with Jesus. He's overturning tables, you know, spiritual tables and physical tables. Yeah. The kingdom of God and the kingdom of man are coming to a head, right? And there's real conflict. And his disciples at various times are freaking out. They're getting afraid. They're getting overexcited. They're misunderstanding the kingdom. And Jesus at this moment, as he's about to make his way to Jerusalem for the Passion, he pauses and he takes his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, and he goes up on the mountain. And it's only in the Gospel of Luke where it says, Jesus took them up on the mountain to pray. And it's Pope Benedict that pointed out that what we see in the Transfiguration is actually a prayer event. And what is made visible in that moment is not just Jesus at prayer, not just the words that he speaks, but what it looks like when Jesus prays. And Chris, I don't know exactly what it looks like when you pray, but when I pray, I don't get lit up and I don't see Old Testament figures showing up and conversing with me. That's not what my prayer life looks like, right? Well, maybe you do. I've heard about that. Yeah. But Benedict talks about how that's what Jesus' prayer actually looks like. And in this moment, he's pulling back the veil for these apostles at this beautiful, mysterious insight as to Jesus' own prayer life and what it looks like visibly when Jesus is united with the Father in that way, when he speaks to him, and there is light that emanates from him. And he speaks, Pope Benedict also says, that there's a great understanding of how we understand the Bible, the Old Testament and its relationship to the New Testament. He appears there with Moses and Elijah. Remember, Moses for the Jewish people represents the law, the lawgiver, the Torah, and Elijah represents the greatest of the prophets. And so Benedict points out that what you see is the law and the prophets, shorthand for the whole Old Testament, is speaking to Jesus. It's speaking about Jesus. It's oriented toward Jesus, and Jesus is in conversation with it. There's so many things that are happening in this scene. But we can take all of that, and we can be reminded, if we're biblically informed, Christians, Catholics, Jewish people, like the apostles were, they're seeing a lot of things. They're like, oh my gosh, we're up on a mountain. There is this dude who is glowing with light. That reminds us of Moses, remember, who went up on the mountain to converse with God, and he was glowing. Ratzinger Benedict points out that the difference is Moses had light shining upon him. Jesus had the light emanating from him.
Oh gosh.
And then the Gospels tell us.
Sorry, there's just so many.
I'm throwing out
many little
a lot
things
of
that, like,
things here.
any one of them, I feel like, just pause for 15 minutes.
Yeah. No,
And
it's
you could
beautiful.
dive into that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't want to cut you
No,
off.
but I want actually to kind of camp out here. I mean, because it's a beautiful scene, because of how much it actually reveals.
I mean, it really strikes me the communion of saints. I haven't heard this used frequently as a Catholic apologetic.
Yeah.
But anyone who would say, anyone who's dead is just, they're gone until the second coming. You shouldn't therefore ask the saints to intercede for you. It's like, well, Moses died and yet he's alive and Jesus is communing with him. And God the Father isn't saying your communion with me is exclusive, and you can't also therefore communion with your family, the saints.
That's silly.
It's like it's all right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then what he reveals is happening to him, that beaming light from within.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what happens with us when we're communing with the maker of the universe. We just don't see it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
But man, I could rest in any one of these. So go keep rolling though.
No, it's awesome. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you're doing this on purpose, but what you're doing right now is exactly what Peter did. Remember, he's like, actually, can we just hold off and camp out and build some booths and stay here? So this is very beautiful. I mean, your experience is actually right in line with what's going on in the gospel.
Yeah, it's the appropriate response.
It's the appropriate response. It's the apostolic response. And let's stay here for a little bit. And Jesus, of course, says, "No, we got to go." But before they go, and actually, there's so many things I would love to talk about here.
Keep going. I'm not cutting you off.
Part of the key to this, and there's a lot of biblical nerdery. I'm not gonna, there's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down. So I want to try to be efficient here. But what we get is the insight. So there's all the things happening. There's the light coming out of Jesus. There's the Old Testament figures. There's the conversation, the orientation of the whole Old Testament. All these things are going on. And then there's the insight into what they're actually talking about, right? And that's what Jesus is lifting the curtain back for the apostles. What does Jesus speak to the Father, to the Old Testament figures, to the scriptures themselves? What's the topic of conversation? And the Gospels tell us that he was talking about his exodus, that he was going to accomplish in Jerusalem, which is really interesting. I've come to think over the last couple of years, and this isn't my own thought. I'm pulling on so many scholars who are smarter than me that have pointed this out to me. The whole Bible, the whole story of salvation is Exodus shaped. And the story of the Exodus is the operative narrative to understand everything else. And this isn't just a Christian idea. You see this throughout the Old Testament. You see it in the Psalms. You see it in Isaiah. You see it every time Israel is in crisis. They say things like, or the prophets or the psalmist says things like, "Lord, stretch out your hand like you did over the waters in the Red Sea." Or remember what you did for us when we were in Egypt. It's always, so the prayer life, even before we get to Jesus, the prayer life of Israel is a prayer life of memory. And it's this idea of saying, hey, we're in a real crisis here, or I'm really afraid of this thing in front of me, or I'm really struggling with this situation in my life. Lord, remember the ways and remind me of the ways in which you've been faithful in the past, because that's going to be the fuel to help me trust in your faithfulness going into the future. So much of the prayer life of the scriptures themselves and the whole Old Testament, the people of Israel, is a prayer of memory. Which is different than just, hey, God, give me this good thing that I want right now. Or, God, comfort me in this. I mean, those are all there. It's hard for me to wrap my head around prayer in the scriptures because it's so multifaceted. But I do think one of the common threads is that it always pulls back on the notion of memory. Remember the ways, which is really helpful if you're in a moment of crisis in your life. Wow. Or if you're facing a thing that you've never faced before and you think, okay, I don't know what to do here. I've lost my job, or I have to discern this relationship, or whatever it is, right? There's this thing happening in my life that I don't know what the answer is. God, let me think about the ways that you've been faithful to me in the past. Is there anything in my life that reminds me of this? Are there any other crises that I can pull on to think back? How were you faithful in that time?
Oh, praise
and
God.
to rest in that, which is what the scriptures do. They rest. And there's here's another funny thing, and this speaks to the whole way the Psalms work, I think. I don't know if it's a problem of modernity or just humanity, but I do feel like there's a sense in our the culture that you and I live in, even the Christian culture, the Catholic culture, that when we face real crises or real challenges to our faith or real doubt, there are two options that people tend to move toward. One is the option of disbelief, and this is kind of the symptom of our times, right? Well, heck with this. I'm not a Christian anymore. I'm not going to go to Mass anymore. I don't understand. I'm going to be an atheist, or I'm going to, and you can find fodder for this all over the internet. You can go on YouTube and find 10 million people to back up your, thought that, I don't really trust. I've been lied to. The church is wrong. God is a sham.
It's all false because
it's all false
my
because
girlfriend
I
broke up
feel
with
this
me.
way.
I mean, literally, it can come down to something like that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And the options are the door is wide open to say, come on in here. This is absolutely an option for you. That's one option. The other option, and maybe this is an even more insidious one, is to kind of play the game, play the church game of like, I don't think I really do believe these things. I really am angry and frustrated and hurt in all these ways, but I'll keep going through the motions. I'll check the box. I'll go to Mass on Sunday. I'll put on a nice smiley face at donuts afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But my heart's not actually here. I actually don't believe these things. And I think there's a lot of people that fall into that category of like, I'm just going to check this box. The thing about the Psalms are an invitation to prayer. And they're an invitation to prayer, not in a nice, pious, like, everything's roses and God is my shepherd, I shall not want. I mean, that's a beautiful, Psalm 23 is awesome.
Yeah.
Psalm 23 is not the totality of the Psalms or the emotions of the Psalms. There are Psalms when the psalmist is like straight up ticked off and angry at God or heartbroken at God or mad at the people around him. So mad he wants to kill people. Like there's real harsh, you know the whole Bible roulette game that people sometimes play? Like I want to pray. I'm just going to open the Bible.
Like don't do that.
And you're like, they're smashing babies' heads against and you're like,
intense.
no.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. Yeah.
But there's room. Not for smashing people's heads against, but the emotion of that. Like, it's actually okay to be overwhelmingly angry and filled with these emotions because God can handle all those things. And so where do you turn with these emotions? You turn to God. And what the psalmist never does, psalmists never do, is say, well, I don't believe that God exists anymore. It says, no, of course God exists. It presumes God exists. That's why I can unload my emotions on him. God, where are you? Why aren't you I know you exist. Of course you exist. There's no option that you don't exist. Look at the world. Look at myself. Look at creation. Look at all these things. Of course there's a God. And if that's true, where are you? I'm mad, Lord. I'm upset. This is a notion the church calls parousia, which is the notion of filial boldness. If God's really our Father, then he can handle our emotion. He can handle our anger, our frustration. I get frustrated when my kids act like jerks to me, you know what I mean? And when they unload their real heavy emotions. But at the same time, and there's a place of respect and honoring their parents, all that stuff, yes, of course. But there's also a sense that like I'm kind of grateful that my kids trust me enough with their emotions to just unload.
And that's all in the context of memory.
That's right.
Because the psalmists aren't just chucking the whole thing out the door.
Yeah.
A song came to my mind as you were talking about that by Sarah Sparks. Got to Google this. What kind of God is this? It'll bring you to tears. About Christmas. That the Lord who held the universe is now in a person's hands. But it ends with, when I can't see or feel the hands of God or something like that, I will recall what love has done. That's it. That's
the biblical story,
right? That he's given his only son for me. I'm butchering the ending of the
no,
song.
Not at all.
But
maybe you are.
Yeah,
yeah, you're totally butchering.
But that's the context that enables me to have filial boldness.
Yeah, that's
that right. His love for me is not on the line if I just bring all myself to this prayer.
That's exactly right.
And I love how too that runs directly counter to, frankly, a movement we're seeing within. I hate to say conservative liberal because those are political terms, but within conservative Catholicism that's trended almost towards stoicism, which isn't Christianity.
No.
Or would say that there's only one appropriate mode of prayer, which is solemn, which is the stoic application of a prayer life. Yeah. And obviously solemn has its place and it's important, but I'll post maybe a picture of kids in praise with their hands in the air and get like, this is pure emotionalism, which I'm thinking like, just because it includes emotion and doesn't check it at the door,
God
doesn't
gave us
make
emotions.
it about emotion and nothing else. But if Jesus prayed the Psalms, which he did, that was the main way he prayed. His apostles saw him praying Psalms all the time.
That's right.
Right? Or the early Christians prayed the Psalms constantly.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing.
Yes.
and it's scandalously human.
Yeah.
Like when I'm reading through those and like, Lord, why are you blessing my enemies? I'm thinking like, I wouldn't want to pray that way. And God's saying, why not?
Why not? I can take it. I can handle it.
Yeah, can you take yourself?
Right.
I think that's where the Stoicism comes from.
That's exactly
It's
it.
hard for us to even handle what's in ourselves.
We don't trust God as a good father who can handle our emotions. I think at the end of the day, I think that's the bottom line. And there's all sorts of reasons that many of us feel that way, but I think that's what it is. I don't think you can handle me, because we can't handle ourselves. I don't. That's a whole.
But he can.
He can, and he does, and he will, and because what? Because he has.
We can't handle ourselves, but he can.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a profound thought.
Yeah.
And we got to remember that.
Yeah.
It's the memory. It's the communion with saints. It's the Psalms.
Yeah.
I want to dive too into the. No, did you want to say more about the Psalms?
No, I want to pull it back to the Transfiguration, the Exodus.
Go back.
If
I don't
we could.
want to prematurely put a bow on the Exodus. Go.
No, because I want to see if we can land this plane toward the Our Father.
I was literally thinking,
I could read
how
your
am I
mind.
going
I
to
knew
tie
it.
this to the Our
No,
Father?
I've already thought.
We have
already-
the same.
We're there.
We're same-brained.
See?
It's awesome.
Okay, so we're back at the Transfiguration.
Yeah.
Peter's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. All of these things are sort of coalescing, right? Jesus, again, pulling back the veil. That's the beauty of this moment, is that he's pulling back the veil. Why is he pulling back the veil? He's pulling back the veil because he knows that when they go down off of that mountain, now Peter wants to camp out. There's all sorts of biblical stuff about. I think Peter wants to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles or booths. There it might have been the season for that in the Jewish calendar. We don't know. There's also Old Testament prophecies that says when the Messiah comes, we're all going to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles together, which is an Exodus celebration. It remembers the time when we were dwelling in the wilderness in tents for 40 years, and God was with us. God was in a tent in this time of wandering and hardship. God was there.
Remember.
And I think what Peter is saying is we should celebrate that. We should remember that now. This is an appropriate moment. And Jesus says, nope, not time for that right now, man. It's not time to camp out. We got to go back down. And if you remember the story, when they go back down, do you remember what they find at the bottom of the mountain? I don't want to put you on the
Hold
spot.
on. I totally don't.
A total junk show. Everybody's in crisis and chaos. And there's
Like
apostles
right away.
right away. They're like, oh my gosh, there was this kid with a demon and we couldn't get it out. And then we all started yelling at each other because we thought we were doing it wrong. And there's crisis and everyone's mad at us. And the church is in total crisis.
Like every time you go on a retreat and come
Like
home.
every time you go on a retreat or come home. Absolutely.
Yes, everything's on fire.
And I think that's part of why Jesus does that for the apostles, because he knows not only is there going to be this crisis waiting for them at the bottom of the mountain, which is real, but that crisis is nothing compared to the crisis that's coming down the road, which is once they get to Jerusalem and once the passion begins, they're all going to run and hide. They're all going to lose heart. I mean, the junk show will be beyond what they can imagine. And the hope is, I think, what Jesus is trying to do is give them some food for that remembrance of, as it's getting harder and harder and harder now to walk down this road, we remember what he showed us. And he showed us that at this moment so that we could remember. It was a gift for what is to come. Not just like, hey guys, come and look at this cool thing, but this gift of, I know where you're going and I know the crises that lie ahead, so I'm going to give you this gift so that you can remember it. That's what I think he's up to.
Oh man, you've been to the Holy Land before?
I've never have.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I'm taking you with me next time. I'm dead serious.
Thank you. I'll go in your
Scott's
carry-on.
coming with me on our next Holy Land pilgrimage. I'm serious, man. I'm taking you with me.
That's filial boldness
We're
right there.
covering your cost. You're coming.
Parcia,
All right?
baby.
The link's going to be in the show notes. You're going to have to do a couple of teachings. I'm dead serious. It'll be
I'd
next
love to
June.
teach.
But every year, God willing, it'll be reopened. And
Yeah.
But there's always a shift because you spend a few days in Galilee where it feels just like it
Comfy.
probably did back then.
Yeah.
It's still there's still rolling green hills and it's peaceful. You go to the Transfiguration, the Mount Transfiguration, and then go to Jerusalem, which is a modern city with an old city section. Yeah. But you start to feel the crunch and the grind, and everything emotionally shifts in the pilgrimage.
Interesting.
But it follows the narrative arc of Jesus' life.
Yes.
It's
that's right.
his glory days is on the North Shore of the Sea of Galilee. Like I can see him smiling and striding around and healing and preaching, and then from Transfiguration down, it's a grind.
Because he knows he can't stay there. And he knows we can't stay where we are. So what's their topic of conversation during this pulling back of the veil? Like we said, it's the Exodus. They're speaking about the Exodus that he's going to accomplish in Jerusalem. The Exodus, it's an odd line, the Exodus that he's going to have in Jerusalem, you should be thinking about that if you're a first century Jew and like, no. The Exodus was a singular event in Egypt thousands of years ago. Like, you can't just do an Exodus. Like, you can remember it, you can have Passover, tabernacles, all of these things call our minds back to these things. But you're saying you're going to have it's like saying, I'm going to have the Super Bowl in my backyard next week. Chris, like, no, you can't just do that.
Yeah.
But what he's doing is reshaping all of salvation history and pointing toward its ultimate end, its telos. I mentioned the whole story of salvation is Exodus shaped. What does that mean? It means that, what is the Exodus? The Exodus is when God reveals himself not just as creator, but not just sustainer, but he reveals himself as redeemer, the one who will come in and rescue us and set us free. It's also the moment that he reveals his name. He's not just a God. He's not just God generically. He's Yahweh. He is your father. This is the Exodus is the first time God's fathership is mentioned explicitly. All of these things were to set the people of Israel free from their captivity, not just physical, not just political, but their spiritual captivity to sin, and to bring them into a home, into a promised land. And so the whole narrative, so there's, and again, I'm stealing this from other scholars who are smarter than me, namely a guy named Tim Mackey, who really articulated this well. Yeah. There's really three parts to the Exodus. There is, the word hodos in Greek, which is what the New Testament is written in. Hodos means road, or we translate it as way. But way, when we hear the word way, we think of like a methodology or like an ideology. Way literally means road. Hodos is a road, a path, like with asphalt and rocks and whatever. The Exodus.
Is that the word Jesus used when he said, "I'm the way"?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he probably spoke in Aramaic, but it's the word that the Gospels use.
That's awesome.
But exodos, when you have a road and you add X to the front of it, it means the road out. It is the road out. If you go to Greece, right, and you're on a highway, it says Exodus 20. Like, it's the off-ramps.
It's trippy, isn't it?
Off the road, yeah. So there's Exodus. And what we think about the Exodus, the first, handful of chapters of the story of the Exodus, the Prince of Egypt, right, the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston, all like the let my people go. Yeah. That's a fraction of the Exodus story. That's the action part. It's the plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea. But the story is bigger than that. There is Exodus, the road out of slavery, of captivity. But we know that's not the end of the story, because that enters us into the wilderness, where you have the road through, the diahodos, right? And the road through is actually the majority of the Old Testament. Passing through the wilderness, the suffering, the testing, the thirst, the hunger, the where are you, God? Are you around the next corner? Which gets you to the eishodos, or the en-hodos, the road into, which you get in Joshua in a certain sense in the Bible, where they go into the promised land and he builds them into a people. But what the Old Testament demonstrates to us is
out of, through, into.
Out of, through, into.
That's the whole Exodus.
The road out, the road through, and the road in.
Wow.
That's the Exodus story, which is bigger than just even the book of Exodus. It's a narrative.
Wow.
But what we find out in the Old Testament is that road in and that kingdom, although it is God's kingdom in a very real way, it does not ultimately fulfill the human desire. We need more. The whole Old Testament ends with that kingdom basically crumbling and burning, and its own sin turning in on itself, and exile and a loss of land and pagan nations coming and lording over them. Yeah. The end, the word of the Lord. And you're like, oh, the Old Testament's over? Like, where's the ultimate?
Moses dies before getting in.
Yeah, all of this stuff.
Dang.
And you're like, that's it? And then Jesus shows up and he's like, no. The Exodus is bigger than what you thought. And so what he's talking about, what he's revealing is, yeah, I'm going to lead you out of a new kind of slavery, not political slavery to Rome, not economic slavery to their taxation, which was brutal and oppressive and cruel and everything else. But there's a much deeper Exodus that is needed of you to be set free from sin and from the power of the evil one, which he's going to do on the cross, which opens up the way to the Christian life, which is the way through. Wow. And what we do in the Christian life is we are on the road through, the diahodos. Do you remember, Chris?
So it's the memory, tying this to prayer.
Yes.
This is the memory of the real story going on.
That's exactly
in whatever drama you're in.
That's exactly right. And to drive a fine point on this, do you remember, before they were called Christians, do you remember what the early church called themselves?
The way.
Yeah, the hodos, literally the road. And when the early Christians Christian was an insult that was leveled against them, they're like, yeah, cool, we'll take it, right? It was the middle finger that the enemies of the church labeled. But before that, that's not what they came up with. They said, no, we're the way, we're the road.
Wow.
And I guarantee you, they were thinking of, number one, the Exodus story, the road through as we're waiting to go into the promised land of heaven. But then they overlaid that on another way. What's the other most famous way in the Bible. There's the way of the Exodus.
Yeah.
And then there's another one we talk about all the time. I'm sure you went there when you went to the Holy Land.
The way of the cross.
The way of the cross.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, these are speaking to each other. This is who we are. We are the Exodus people. What is the way? The way of the cross. That's our whole identity. And that's how they what they called themselves, which is so mind-blowing to me that they actually get this. Now,
how beautiful.
How does that tie into the Our Father?
Yeah, I want to say this too, though, about prayer and memory, because some people are thinking, well, how do I do that while praying? Right. Half of prayer, or maybe more than half of prayer, should like a conversation, should be listening.
Absolutely.
Not just talking.
Yeah.
So if we're going to remember, that means a big chunk of our prayer should be reading the Bible.
Absolutely.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Just if the rest is overwhelming or confusing, I've heard the great saying that the Gospels can be something that a mouse can wade in and an elephant can drown in. Yes. Like wherever you are,
that's good.
Right? You can digest these stories. That's how God made them.
Yeah.
It's as accessible as God Himself.
I think that's absolutely right.
Right. So make sure you make that time to just sit down and listen with your cup of coffee and read the Word. Yeah.
I mean, you see this with Jesus. Jesus never. And again, this isn't meant to be, an accusation toward any of us. But Jesus never really shows up with his little pocket Bible. He doesn't have like a scroll that he pulls out of his pocket.
Yeah.
Where are the scriptures for him? They're deeply in his memory. They're deeply embedded.
He can literally recite them.
He can recite them, and he does. Yeah. And when the evil one is testing him in the wilderness, right? He's just pulling out scriptures because it's like background music to him.
He's entering the battle with the Word.
With the story, because the story is, and we do this with everything. We were just. I showed my ignorance, but we were kind of nerding out at the beginning of the show about Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of narratives that we all have ready at hand to talk about. We could talk about Lord of the Rings, or we could talk about, the Chronicles of Narnia, or we could talk about Star Wars, or whatever. There's a million stories that we know that we could articulate almost perfectly, right? But the Bible tends to not be one of those. You know what I mean? And that's the sense. It's not just because I struggled for so long, and I teach the Bible. I struggled for so long with just sitting down and like trying to just rotely read through until I saw it as a narrative. And I'm like, oh, this is a story. There's good guys, there's bad guys, there's intrigue, there's ups, there's downs. Jesus, he's like a James Bond movie. Like he's like, go to the guy in the road. You're gonna give him the secret signal. He'll have a water thing on his head. He'll lead you to the room that I've prepared for the lesson. You're like, this guy's awesome. Like this story is amazing. Yeah. But to treat it like a story, not a fictional story. But like a story that's so deeply embedded that we don't have to always quote chapter and verse. It's good to quote chapter and verse. But to have that narrative, and most of us who are Catholics who have gone to Mass for any long period of time, we've got it. We just have to sort of unlock it and put the pieces together.
Yes.
And like, oh yeah, I know this story.
And then call it to mind.
And then
in
call
the
it to
moments
mind.
of crisis.
Yes.
Like I just went through one recently. I came out of a massive health scare. Docs were watching me for several months because of nonstop muscle twitching right now. But to make sure I don't have ALS, and then did an EMG to stick a bunch of needles and shocks, and like, okay, you're clear. It took like 8 months to get to the point where I got the all clear. Through that time, I'm praying prayers like, God, you got to help me. Yeah. Like this is a filial boldness. Like I'm trying to be present to my family, and not present to the death that we're all going to face at some point. But I'm going to live while I live. But then it was also calling to mind, where, O death, is your victory? Where's your sting?
Right.
Calling to mind, if I feel dread. Devil, stop projecting your future on me. That's not my future. My future is not dread. It was calling these things to mind and not just begging God for help, but receiving the help He already gave me.
Yeah.
I'm going to recall His love for me.
I love that.
Oh, praise God.
I love that.
But there's another thing we see in the Transfiguration and in the Our Father. Right? I'm going to slow pitch the Our Father back to you. It's that comfort level. There's almost a casual. Here He is conversing.
Yeah.
There's not a protocol that my children have when they come talk to me. I'm not saying that liturgically there's no protocols. Obviously there is, and those things can be good. But there's also a boldness of, hey, Dad, I need $5. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to say, leave the room, first write a memo, then approach me at the right angle, then kneel. Again, especially liturgically, there's a place for all those things.
Yes. Right.
But the heart of prayer, especially one-on-one with the Lord in your living room, I think that's revealed in the Psalms, in the Transfiguration, in the Our Father.
Yeah, absolutely right.
But the Our Father, people treat it like, okay, here's this prayer I memorize and I leave it there. It also teaches you how to. So how does it teach us how to?
Because it brings us back to our story. Every word. So there's two pieces of context. Number one, where does he give them the Our Father? So in the Gospel of Luke, where it shows up is it's after the Transfiguration, as they're on the road to Jerusalem. So it's a road trip prayer, quite literally, for those of us Christians who are on the way, which is all of us, right? We're all in the Diohodos. It's a Diohodos prayer of how long, O Lord, as we're traveling ahead, as we're going down this way. And if you read it carefully, what it's meant to do, so remember, they're headed to Jerusalem. Jesus is going to be crucified. Everything is going to be flipped upside down, and they're all going to lose their minds. They don't realize that. Jesus does. They're overconfident, talking about thrones, talking about who's the best. All these things are happening. And they're like, Jesus, teach us how to pray. What do we actually say? Which reveals something interesting. They have the Psalms. They have the prophets. They have all of these great, beautiful Jewish prayers and liturgies. But those things alone don't teach them everything. There is still obviously something outside of the rubrics to learn. Teach us how to pray. Is there more that we should understand? And he's like, all right, when you pray like this. Say, Our Father. I mentioned this before. The first time God is spoken about as Father is in the story of the Exodus, when he reveals that my children, my firstborn son, my little boy is enslaved in Egypt, and there's someone oppressing him and beating him down and enslaving him, and I will not let that stand for my son. And so God shows up as Father who rescues. I mean, again, he's not a generic God. He's not just an abstraction, or like the Egyptian gods or the Mesopotamian gods or the Aztec gods, right? This distant, mean kind of reality that we have to appease. The human mind has always been drawn from the beginning of human history to spiritual, divine figures who are bigger than us, who are more powerful than us, who we're almost always terrified of, because they're probably out to get us. That is the human experience. The atheism, I mean, that is such a brand new historical concept. It didn't come about until probably around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Honestly, that's
totally counterintuitive.
It is, until you can be your own God, or at least convince yourself that you're your own God. But atheism is completely... it's not the human experience. What is the human experience is, I'm small, there's big things out there, they're more powerful, they're probably going to get me. How do I make them not mad at me, right? And then the biblical story comes in and says, no. The God that is over all of these other things that scare you, like weather and wolves that are going to eat you, and lions and droughts and hail that will destroy your crops, there's a God who's bigger than all that stuff. And he is Father. And he loves you. And you're the
Isn't that awesome?
It was how provocative Genesis would have been in its original context. For people to be like, what? You're telling me that there is a God who is not to be feared, but who actually loves us, who wedded himself to us, and I'm not an afterthought. I'm not the residue of the cosmic battles between the gods and the goddesses, which is what all the ancient mythology said. No, I'm the Set Lem, the image and likeness of the King of Kings. Like, that was mind-blowing.
Maybe is mind-blowing to someone watching right now.
It should be mind-blowing to every generation.
Totally. Because there's people who go to church for years, and that's stuck deep in their psyche.
Yeah.
They just, in the ancient world, there's lots of gods, because that's the only way to describe how I'm having all these various experiences of life.
Absolutely right.
I just went to Holst's Planets. What a cool thing to listen to.
Oh,
right.
I had some seminarians who were at
Denver
that.
Symphony Orchestra this weekend, but it goes through all the planets and the gods and all these different sounds, and I'm thinking that's how everybody's reconciled reality throughout most of history. There's got to be lots of them, and some of them are really mean, and the best you have with Zeus is joviality, maybe. Jove, that he's the guy I'm going to party with.
Zeus was also a scoundrel.
But he's a jerk.
Not to be trusted.
Right?
Yeah. And the Roman equivalent of Zeus was Jupiter.
Jupiter, yeah. The big planet.
Of which the Jupiter in the Four Seasons, remember, becomes one of my favorite hymns.
Oh,
because
dude.
we take that notion of Jupiter and we baptize it.
Dude, there's tears pouring down my
things.
face, and that
I love it.
Because my girls all had that song in their weddings.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, so the visuals came up with my girls going in the aisle, and I almost started to snort cry.
Memory. This is the power of memory, though.
Yes.
This is the power of memory, and the power that things like song and liturgy have to evoke those things in us.
But with the Lord, with the biblical narrative, is the only one where you see all these experiences of life wrapped up in a God who doesn't escape reality and says it's all explained by the cross, which is not a neat explanation, but I love you.
Right.
Here it is.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And before there was the cross, there was the Exodus. which wasn't the cross, but it was the redemptive God pouring out his love on humanity for the Old Testament. Before that was blown open in the cross in a way that nobody could have dreamt of. But the Exodus is the cross of the Old Testament. That's a weird way of saying that, but you know what I'm saying? Like it is the redemptive event. But it's also the moment that God...
From slavery to life and sonship.
God coming in, condescending into human history, saying, I'm putting these gods to death. They are no God. Remember, the whole point of the Exodus, God says this, is that so Israel may know me, so the Egyptians might know me, so that all the other nations may know me, and so that every generation henceforth may know me.
Wow.
To be known. So our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Exodus, Exodus, Exodus. That's the moment that God reveals his... You can't separate the name of God from his redemptive power, his fatherhood, and setting his child, his son, free. So our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, which you were good enough to give to us. To name, you know, do you remember the days of like old phone, like actual phones that hung on walls? You know what I mean? Like our parents' house, the corded, you know what I'm talking about? Before cell phones.
Back when you used to have to say, it's for you, which is not said anymore.
Or you just answer and be like, hello. But you know, until you knew who it was before the days of like caller ID, you don't always give your name. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, who is it? Who's calling? Is Chris there? Like, I don't know.
Who are you?
But it was actually, in a certain sense, a kind of move of intimacy to reveal your name. Yeah, this is Chris. Who is this? You know what I mean? Like, there's something about giving one's name that reveals an intimacy. Like, you're giving a part. And so, in a much bigger way, the name of God being revealed. And the name, you know, the Tetragrammaton is, you know, dissertations have been written about this. It's just a verb tense.
Full nerd right there. I love it.
I know. Well,
don't circumlocute your Tetragrammaton.
No, I never would. I never would. But it's a verb tense. Like, what's your name? My name is. My name is to be. I am existence itself. And the reason he gives this, remember, Moses doesn't know God because they've forgotten. It's a lack of memory. And he says to this God who's speaking out of a bush, he's like, you want me to go tell Israel that their God is going to set them free? Who should I say is calling? Like, which one? Remember, he's like, what's your name? Which God are you? Yeah. He's like, which God am I? I am. That's who I am. Go tell them I am is calling, right? That's who's coming. But there's so much wrapped up into this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, because of what that says about you. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What God is going to do through the Exodus is build Israel into from a group of slaves to a kingdom of God that will be endowed with God's grace to be a sacramental sign to the world that God is bigger than what you think he is. The kings of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, failed as many times as they do, were meant to be a sacramental sign, a small s sacrament, right? Yeah. A visible sign of an invisible reality, God's rule and reign over the earth. So let your kingdom come on earth just like it is in heaven, because we know that reality and we want to live it down here. What's the next one? Give us this day our daily bread. As we go and try to live this out, give us the manna in the desert. As we go through the wilderness, give us that manna, that Exodus. Supernatural bread. It's all Exodus.
It's all the
give
math.
us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against you. All of the Exodus story was them continually trespassing against God and continually saying, you love us, we hate you. You want to save us, we want Egyptian gods. We want Apis, we want golden calves. We don't trust, you know, this is a side note. I've changed my opinion on this in recent years. You remember when Moses, they're out in the wilderness, Moses goes up on the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
And the people of Israel, they've witnessed God do these amazing things. They've witnessed all the gods of Egypt basically be put to death. The Yabashah be revealed, the waters be separated so the dry land they can go out on, which reminds us of creation when God separated the waters of chaos and gave us dry land to live on. They witness, they see all of it. And then they see Moses go up on the mountain, and the mountain is shrouded in fire and smoke and lightning. Like there's a wildfire on the mountain, and it's terrifying. And they're like, well, he's dead. Right, that's their initial response. Like, and if he's dead, but it's not though.
No.
That's what I used to think.
Oh man,
what are they doing?
Yeah. They're going back to the last thing they had that they felt like something. This isn't here anymore.
I don't think that's what they're doing. I used to think that. I used to think, and I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So far be it from me.
Let's hear it.
They go up. They watch Moses go up on the mountain. They see him swallowed by fire, and so their conclusion is not. Again, we're back to modernity. Their conclusion is not. Well, I guess that God wasn't real. I don't think that's what anybody's thinking. They're thinking, oh, crud. This God is just like all the rest.
Oh, dang.
he will turn on you if you don't watch your step. He just ate Moses, right?
Wow.
They're like, he's like the rest of them.
Wow.
We've been lied to. He's just like everybody else. So we need to create our own, we need to get our own God to fight against this God. Because what is human life but a battle of the gods? Who has the stronger divinity behind them? So we will get Apis. And Apis is worship.
I've never heard that before. Have you ever, is that a Scott original?
I don't think so, but I don't
We're
I don't
claiming
know.
it. TM,
I don't
trademark, Scott
I don't know.
Powell.
I don't know. I mean, it's probably informed by a lot of things.
That's
but doesn't that make
incredible.
more sense?
Totally.
Like, we don't believe anymore. That doesn't. What?
No, that's a
No,
postmodern
he's like
thing.
Zeus. He's like Apis. He's like all the rest.
Wow.
He's real and he's terrifying. I mean, this is the thing, even in modernity, I don't think most people don't believe in a God. They just don't trust whatever is out there.
So then
We're
I
no
start to rely on all my stuff.
We have to
my
gain
self-reliance, my
we
money,
can fight
my
back.
power. Yeah.
So we can create a safety net so that when God comes calling and he's out to get
Dang.
me, I'm safe. That's what they're doing. They're doing what all of us do, just in a different way. Wow. So, I don't remember how we
You're
got
back
there.
in the Hodos now.
Yeah, the temptation.
Yeah, it's not
forgive us.
temptation.
So forgive us our trespasses. You know, the Jewish people, the Hebrews, they viewed the sin of the golden calf as a much more severe sin than even the sin of Adam and Eve in the garden.
Well, that was the fall for them. Yeah.
They were like, that is
Psyche.
the fault, because we had Adam and Eve, like it's a primordial event. You know, human beings are just kind of figuring themselves out. This was, God had shown himself. Like we knew better. And so they see this as the bigger fall, which again, take that for whatever you will. So forgive us of our trespasses. As we forgive those, remember God in the Exodus gives this thing called the Jubilee, which we're actually celebrating this year, which is this notion of, as you forgave us and set us free in the Exodus, we need to do that and live that out for each other. So in the ancient world, they would forgive debts and they would release slaves and they would give land back because they remembered once we were slaves, once we were landless, once we were indebted, and God set us free. So let us live that out, what you gave to us. Forgive us our sin, our trespasses, we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into the temptation. Remember the testing of the 40 years in the wilderness, which Jesus then takes on and conquers for us.
Yeah.
Lead us not into that, but deliver us rather from evil that Jesus tangled with and basically punched in the face
Praise
after
God.
40 years or 40 days of fasting, right? At his weakest possible moment, as some of the saints say, like a boxer with one arm tied behind his back. He goes and picks a fight with the evil one to show who's actually boss.
Yeah.
But the whole of the Our Father prayer is the road trip prayer that is calling back to mind the ways that God has always been faithful and begging him to be faithful in new ways. And in those same ways, but in ways that we haven't seen them before.
Praise the Lord.
And that's what Jesus gives us. He's like, that's how you should do it. Now, we
I
pray.
was going to say, this has been like watching a theological fireworks show. This is grand finale quality fireworks. No, seriously, this is a lot to chew on.
It's a lot of stuff. But it's
We
cool.
watched this in slow motion a couple times. Not that slow.
Okay.
Maybe 0.75.
All right. Is that an option?
It is. I want to add somebody. Were you done with?
No, that's what I got.
Another great thing Jesus teaches us how to pray is simply often.
Yeah, that's right.
I was always struck by Luke chapter 4. He went into the solitude, the wilderness, and he, 40 days at the beginning of Luke 4. Then he does ministry
It's a long
stuff,
time. That's a
right?
month and a half, man.
Totally.
It's a long time.
But then by the end of Luke 4, what's he doing? He's back in the solitude again.
Yeah,
by the
that's
end
right.
of the chapter, he's like, he comes out, does some stuff,
that's right.
gets back away.
That's a really good insight, actually.
Yeah, it's like constant.
Yeah.
The biggest story was the interior story going on all the time with him. And then he came out of that place, that hiding place, to come and be with people and bless them.
And then he takes us up on the mountain. It's like, you guys want to know what it looked like? Here you go.
Yeah.
And he pulls the veil back, and he's like, this is what I've been doing.
Okay, so someone tomorrow morning, brewing their coffee, about to pray before they head into the day.
Yeah.
I'd say first, make sure you do it. Do it often. Even if it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever you got. Though I lean more toward the 30, 40-minute
Ideally, yeah.
goal, But what do they do? Like, let's make this uber practical. Someone doesn't really know how to pray. They're a little overwhelmed by this. I want to pray like Jesus did. What did he teach us? Okay, what am I doing right now?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is an answer or not. I keep coming back to another of my favorite characters in the New Testament, a guy named Simeon. He is a great model for prayer, although maybe not as practical as we want him to be. Remember Simeon? He's in Luke chapter 2,
Yeah.
And what we find out, he's this old man who spends all of his days at the temple waiting for the comfort, the consolation of Israel, which is a reference to Isaiah 40. And what he's waiting for is the fulfillment of the Exodus story. That's what Isaiah is talking about. He's basically saying every day, how long, O Lord, till you show your face to us? How long? And he's remembering the story. He's remembering where Israel was. And he's going with filial boldness, a trust every single day. I want to know how you're going to show up in my life today, and how you're going to show up not only in my life, because it's not just about me. How are you going to show up for the people of Israel? How are you going to show up, Lord, for the church in new and incredible ways? But he was so attuned to the voice of the Lord. He was, like you said, he was so attuned to that listening, to remembering that story, that alone, nobody else got it. But him in isolation sees a tired, weary, exhausted, road trip ridden family, the Holy Family, coming in from the wilderness with their offering of the poor, the turtle dove, and their baby in their arms. And he's like, boom, that's it.
That's the Messiah.
This is what all of Israel has been waiting for. But he knows that, and he gets that because of his prayer. I will wait on the Lord. I will pray that you will show me your consolation. I will listen. I will be quiet. I will remember the story. I'll play it over. I'm putting words in Simeon's mouth, obviously. But I'll play the story again and again. If you pray, I would tomorrow morning, just because this has almost rejuvenated me too. I have my prayer time, and I usually show up and I don't know what to do, or I think about the things I have to do that day, and I stress out about. You know what I mean?
Well, it's a battle,
my mind.
Prayer is a battle.
I'm going to try to pray the Our Father prayer very, very slowly.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to try to remember both how God did that in the Old Testament, but the other ways in which he gave me the bread that I needed for that day, and usually no more. And the ways in which he showed up for that, the ways in which I saw his kingdom reality in a way that I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's why I do this. That's why we work for the church. That's why we're here. That's why I go to Mass. I'm going to try to remember all of those ways in which God did that in my life, pull back those memories, and then pray that he will do it again in new and ways that are going to just surprise me. I'm going to pray that God surprises me tomorrow.
Thanks, man. I feel rejuvenated too, honestly. This is just a beautiful thing to think about, and thank you for this, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It reminds me too to remember and to incorporate into my prayer time reading the Bible. And I love just Googling to find the Catholic Mass reading of the day, the Gospel.
It's the best.
And just to give myself time with it and breathe it in.
Yeah.
You know, what are you saying in my heart through this reading today, Lord?
Yeah.
And then, you know, the filial boldness, just whatever is on my heart. I hear him, and then what he wants is what's inside of me, even if it's messy and as ugly as what the psalmists were saying sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
And Lord, just, there it is.
And there's a relief, even on a human level, there's just a relief to just getting it out.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I said, I don't feel so bad. I'm not as angry anymore.
Yes.
Like, there's a grace to that, I think.
You know, and part of the memory part of prayer that also coincides with what we're saying to God is, and this is something I've been pretty good about being devoted to, is a lot of thanks.
Yeah.
You know, and when I'm like in a really bad mood, I'll take my rosary out and I'll count a grateful in every bead.
Good.
Which
really good.
some days I don't feel like I have time for, but what I really don't have time for is for jerk Chris to take over my entire day. And he's in there. You haven't met him, but
I've met him. No,
You've met him every once in a while.
No,
he's in there, man.
I love him too.
But like thanks, buddy. But yeah, just counting those gratefuls, and it calls to mind the blessings of God. But the filial boldness, and just like, Lord, you're my Father, I'm your Son. I often remember when I'm going into prayer, an image of my little girl sitting next to me at Mass one time. She was 3, staring at me, just staring with a smile like this. And then I looked down, she goes, "You're my dad."
Oh.
And she just kept staring.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
And that's how I'm supposed to go.
Be quiet.
Yeah.
Pay attention. That's probably what I would have done.
And you didn't say that in Latin when you're in church.
Oh my God.
Sorry. But that's the spirit I have to enter prayer with. You know, my Father is actually excited to see me here. Yeah. And if I thought about praying, it's because he thought of me first. Yeah. And he called me to it. I love that in the Catechism talks about this. Actually, I wrote this down. The Catechism in 2560, Google that. It's about the woman at the well. Jesus approaches her for a drink, then he turns the tables, and he says, "If you knew, you'd ask me for a drink." Yeah. And the Catechism says, whether we realize it or not, prayer is an encounter of God's thirst with ours. God thirsts that we may thirst for him.
Oh, that's a good line.
Right?
An encounter of his thirst with ours.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So if you feel like you're not doing it right, first remember that you're there. You're showing up, because God literally, maker of the universe, literally called you, put that idea in your heart, put the thirst in your heart, because he is hungry, is thirsty for that time with his child. And then the rest is details.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, when we, hang out with our kids, like,
Yeah.
I'm not that worried about the agenda. I'm like, okay, what am I going to say to my 8-year-old when we go to ice cream? Like, you just want to be there. Just want to hang out.
Yeah.
And just spend time together. What's that? Is it St. John Vianney, who's the patron of the seminary where I teach? He has this story. You remember this? There's every day he says Mass in ours, where he was a parish priest.
Go.
And there's this old guy who every day after Mass just sits there for like an hour, a long time. And, he's cleaning up the vessels. And this guy is just always there, longer than anybody else. And one day, and I'm paraphrasing the story, one day he goes up and he's like, when you're obviously praying, you obviously have this beautiful prayer life. Like, what are you saying? Like, what are you doing in prayer during that time? And he's like, I look at him, he looks at me.
Oh, awesome.
Which, the simplicity of that.
Yes.
It's like, you don't have to have an agenda.
No.
The church, praise be to God for those days where you're like, I don't know what to do. I can pray in our Father. We actually have prayers and rubrics that we can land on. But there's also the times where you're just, I can just sit here. I'm just tired. Sometimes in prayer, I'm just like, Lord, I'm just tired, man.
And I do have to give props to the for the memorized prayers that some people will look at from the outside and presume, oh, they're just going through the motions. And I'm thinking, well, sometimes that's all I got in me.
100%. Praise be to God for the memorized prayers.
Same with marriage. I mean, sometimes like the rituals and going through the motions keeps things alive. When
oh, Jesus, when you tangled with the evil one in the wilderness, you were going on wrote memorized prayers. Yeah. No, like there's a reason we memorize prayers. Jesus did it.
Because he's tired and he hadn't eaten for 40 days.
Yes, but he had Deuteronomy.
That's it.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Wow. I love you, man. It's really great to be with you.
Too.
Thank you.
Chris.
And I love you, and so does God. And what an honor and blessing to soak in some good news together. Let's end with the Lord's Prayer that he taught us. And thank you, Jesus, for teaching us how to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Lord. See you next time.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, buddy. That was awesome.
See you, man.
That was amazing. Praise God.